This might trigger you, but we have to talk about it. And the question is this, right? Why do women divorce most of the time? We have to talk about it. I'm going to address it. I know if people don't want to hear it, people don't want to talk about it. I'm going to talk about it. It just is what it is. You might not like what you're going to hear, but we're going to get into it right now and just speak about some of the reasons why women actually divorce significantly more than men and initiate divorce significantly more than men on average. There are reasons for it. And you know what? Some of it might actually surprise you. I'm not going to lie. So let's actually talk about this and yeah, let's do it. Hey everyone, my name is Jerry with God and Jerry, and I'm your number one go-to for finding a kingdom spouse and solving your relationship problems forever. Okay. Today we're going to talk about something crazy. There's a lot of different reasons floating around, again, in the internet sphere, different things like that. But we're gonna talk about some of the most observable, let me say, because I know there's so many different things that are underlying. But we're gonna talk about some very observable things that might cause women to divorce more than men. Okay. Before we get into it, if you can please hit the like button so that you can actually get this video to a ton more people who are just like you, who will watch this and actually get pertinent information. And then also, if you subscribe, it goes a long way, especially if you've already seen a couple of my videos, our videos, I should say. And it's going to be able to reach a bunch of people that you might not ever meet simply because you hit subscribe, simply because you hit the like. They're absolutely free, charges you nothing. So it's good to also be able to keep things on this platform, this particular platform, free as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right. Why women divorce most of the time. This is like, okay, we have to start on a foundational level, right? The foundation is this, right? Statistically, we see that in a relationship where a degree is involved, a bachelor's degree, undergraduate degree, wherever you're from, the first 4 years, typically 3 to 4 years after you graduate from high school, from grade level schools. I know different people from different countries might be watching this. So those first 4 years in college and university, when you graduate that, we call that a bachelor's or an undergraduate degree. Now, what happens is when a relationship has at least one of those things involved, the chances of if there is a divorce that occurs, 90% of the time it's going to be initiated by the woman in that relationship. Now, if there's no bachelor's or undergraduate degree involved, then we only have 80%. It's a 10% decrease. So if there's a divorce, then it's only 80% of the time that a woman will initiate the divorce. Okay, so that's kind of like the foundation of what we see today. And we actually have to speak about why this might be. So first and foremost, the reality is I don't want to blame women or blame men, particularly in this situation. What I will actually do is place blame on our society, right? We're in the end times, and that means that there is a ruler of this world, the prince of the air, as the Bible refers to that, to Satan and demons that actually rule this situation. That influence what's happening right now. And obviously, for those who haven't read the Bible, there are a ton of different things in the Bible that are actually coming to pass right now that have not happened actually since the Bible was actually created and written through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. There are so many things that the Bible prophesied thousands of years ago that would happen in the end times, and they're happening now. So this is actually one of them. What we're talking about is actually one of them. In Matthew 24, Jesus talks about how the love of many will grow cold. So we have governments that actually legally incentivize women to leave their marriages. Okay. So when you have a situation where you are legally and monetarily incentivized to do something, most of the time, especially if you don't have like a huge morality background, especially if you don't have like a huge, belief in God. Like God obviously created marriage. So all marriages actually stem from God. God created that institution. It's not a license as much as many people will say. It's not a contract. It is a covenant. Marriage is a covenant between two people, a man and a woman. And it's a lifelong covenant that even if it's annulled by human beings, God does not annul that covenant because it is a covenant that includes him, and he made marriage. I actually talk about this and much, much more in a program that's actually been created and catered for you. For those who are actually serious, that actually want to one day be married to a kingdom spouse, that want to solve the relationship problems forever, whatever dynamic that might look like, whether it's romantic, primarily romantic, we're going to talk about that, but it can also work with business, it can work with friends, it can work with parents, it can work with church, whatever's going on, professional. You definitely click the link in the description. You know, there's a lot of things that I talk about in that program that I will not be talking about on this platform, particularly because some of it, you know, is very harsh, and I've toned it way down for this platform, but it's highly, highly potent. So if you know that you're somebody, regardless of your age, you know you want to have great results in relationships or a relationship because you're that serious, definitely click the link in the description. Okay. So this is the thing, right? When you have a monetary and legal incentivization to leave it, if you don't have that background of morality, you know, what I mean by that is flippy floppy, and you know, what you say isn't in line with what you do. If you don't have a huge belief in God, typically what's going to happen is you're going to take that incentivization. And in this case, it's presented by the government. So the government, what they do is, okay, cool. When you guys split, we're going to attempt to take half the money. Like, we're going to divide your assets most of the time, and in most, not all situations, but in the far majority of situations, it's the man that has actually created those assets and whatever's being divided, for the most part, not all, right? For the most part. And that's what we see historically. Now, that's going to be divided, number one. So you already have a situation where someone hasn't done an equal amount of actual work to procure those assets, getting those assets legally due to a divorce, right? Then we have, and I'm just speaking objectively. I'm not trying to make things subjective. Again, I'm not trying to place blame anywhere. I'm just explaining the mentality of what's actually occurring and why this mindset is so prevalent. So you have, in addition, you have spousal support, where a person that's making more money, typically the man, is going to have to support the woman financially for a certain amount of time, alimony, right? Now, sometimes it's in the other direction, where a man is not making as much and the woman actually is going to support the man. So in those situations, and sometimes again, the woman in these off situations, the woman is the one that has created those assets, and the man is divorcing. But the reality is, again, men actually divorce far less on average. So again, if we look at the disparity with the degrees, right? If there is a degree that is involved in the relationship, it is 90%. If there's a divorce, 90% of the time is going to be a woman, which means 10% of the time is going to be a man that initiates that divorce. So that's a 9-to-1 ratio. So it's a 9-time, like a woman is 9 times more likely to divorce in that circumstance. And then without a degree, it's actually 4 times, because it's 80% to 20%. So the woman now is 4 times more likely. So it's almost like if you go to school, if there's going to be a divorce, because here's the thing, divorce is already 50%, right? It happens about half the time. So if you're going to school, understand that if you do get married, you know, you're already halfway likely to be divorced. And then the woman is 90% likely to initiate that divorce if you are a man. All right. So just understand that statistically. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to put any feelings into it. I'm just discussing what we're seeing. So you see the alimony that we talked about. You see, spousal support, right? You see child support. So a government will actually pay you. And I know many situations where a government is going to pay you child support. If they can't procure that from the man, if they can't get that from the man, typically there's things that come from the government that will help you, child support, whatever you want to call it. And then ideally, the government will try to go after the man for the child support, typically if they're the person that has been making the most money traditionally, all that stuff, right? So when you look at like a situation where you're monetarily incentivized to do something, why would someone that does not have a huge morality background, does not have a huge God background or Christian background, why would they not exercise that situation? Especially in this part of the world where satanic things are very prevalent. And I live in North America. So this is like, and it wasn't always like this. It's just really like the phenomena is really like in the last, I would say, 30, 40, 50 years where we're seeing a lot of crazy things, and it's becoming worse as time goes on. So if you're seeing that, it obviously it makes sense why these things are going to occur. All right, so we got a couple left, and I'm going to get through it super quick. Another thing will be custody, right? And I know things are starting to change, and I actually predicted this a couple of years ago, where I'm just like, hey, you know what? We're obviously seeing very negative trends where many women are actually taking advantage of the court system. Where it's like, okay, well, just because someone gets divorced, the court system is going to lean towards the woman and favor the woman just because they're a woman. So like the court system in this part of the world is very biased. And I'm sure like I live in North America, so I'm sure in other parts of the world it's biased against women, it's biased more for men. For in this part of the world, I predicted that we're going to start seeing more of a balance. And we're actually starting to see that in different states in the US, like Kentucky, different places that are actually starting to say, hey, if people get divorced, the custody is actually going to be shared 50-50. So now it's like, okay, well, what's the advantage of getting divorced? What we're going to start seeing is money. And I'm going to talk about this in another video, so let me not stretch it too much. But we're going to start seeing more balance when it comes to finances, where it's like, okay, if you want to initiate the divorce and the grounds is not necessarily, where they should be, the reality is we're going to have people share the load a lot more, and the government is going to step out more, because the government does not want to be responsible for the outcome of your botched relationship or your botched marriage. And the reality is we botch our own marriages, right? So I don't want to get too much into that, but essentially custody is also something, like, for the most part right now, at least for the most part, for the time being in North America, Canada, specifically Canada and the US, the woman is going to get custody far more often than the man. Unless and I've seen many court situations where unless the woman is absolutely out to lunch, they're not going to give it to the man. They're going to make it very difficult for the man to actually obtain that. And I'm just speaking objectively, because there is a bias. And we see that in the numbers. You don't have to actually believe what I'm saying. You can go and research the numbers, go and look at all these cases objectively, which means it's just by fact, this is what's actually occurring. Okay, the last thing that I'm going to speak on before I end this real quick is that it's also in the raising of men and women. So in our society, and I would say most societies, but for sure our society, men are raised to have more grit. We're raised to be like the problem solvers, the hands-on type of person, stick it out no matter what. What I find is that most women, and I've come across thousands and thousands of women, most women are not raised in that way. They're raised, okay, and especially if they come from a third world culture, for be in the kitchen, cook, clean, be loyal, stuff like that, right? There's not really like a stick-to-itiveness. There's and this is the same reason why women typically don't shoot their shot with men. Unless they're like high up there and they shoot because they don't think they're going to get it, and they'll just DM you. But most of the time in person, women will not shoot that because they're not trained to have grit. They're not trained to be able to handle things like rejection. Men are trained for that. Men are trained to be in situations they don't like and still stick it out because you want to see a certain outcome. That's one of the main reasons why men actually don't initiate more and women actually initiate far more, because they haven't been raised with that skill set, and it's a mindset, right? So part of what I'm doing to help with that is my daughters, I'm going to be raising them to have the stick-to-itiveness and the understanding to be like, okay, if you pick a partner, you're going to stick with that person. Most people are not trained. Most women right now are not trained with that mentality of sticking to it no matter what, because you made that covenant and you made that decision. So those are some of the main key things. The reality is, I don't place blame on anybody, because a lot of this is government stipulation. A lot of it is how someone was raised by their parents. So parenting is a problem, huge problem in our society. I'm going to talk about that later, but that's essentially the core of it. Okay. So yeah, definitely let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. I want to know if you think that I've missed anything. I'm sure that I've missed a number of things, but I want to know from you. I want to hear from you what I might have missed and what maybe I should talk about in a separate video. So if you actually want to recognize the early signs on if something is going to last or not, definitely check this video right here. It's going to talk about some of the early signs, some of the very, very important early signs that you can recognize right away. Okay, so I love you guys. It's Jerry with God and Jerry. I'm out. Blessings.